Coach, life is different now. You decided to retire. Congratulations on a great career. What led you to the decision?
Well, thanks, Miles, first of all. You know, it was a situation where it was coming close to time to call it a career, and we were thinking about going one more season, and then the COVID virus hit, and my wife and I had plenty of time to sit down and talk about things and discuss things as family. And our son has one daughter, Amelia, and then one on the way, and my daughter's getting married in October. And about mid-May, we just decided, hey, maybe it's time to give somebody else a shot, and called it a career.
So it was a gradual discussion and decision between you two? Yeah,
it sure was, and just a situation where she's been my right-hand person for a long time, and been very, very supportive of what I've done as a coach, and sacrificed an awful lot of things, and it basically was time for me to start doing that, and be around for the grandkids and be around for her, and it's been great so far.
Oh, good. I'm glad you're happy with this decision. You look like it. You're happier. Isn't that funny how after the season you're a little more relaxed and you got a smile comes back after the season? Good for you. This love affair with basketball. You coached for 30 years and played, in high school. Had a great college career. Played when you were younger. How did this love affair with basketball begin?
Wow, it's a long time ago. As a little kid, my older brother Jay was 1 year ahead of me.
Okay.
And we just caught the love of basketball through our dad, and he was very, very supportive. Played a lot with us. Played some one-on-one. Played some horse with us and things like that. And just fell in love with the game. Fell in love with going to high school games at the old high school uptown, and watching college games. UCLA was a tremendous team at that time, and watching them play. My dad was a huge Boston Celtic fan, so we watched some NBA and so forth, and just fell in love with the game, and luckily it took off, and basketball has given me an awful lot, and I'm very, very grateful to it.
You talk about some of those great Celtics and UCLA teams. I'm sure John Wooden, guys like that, Red Auerbach, were huge influences on you. Who are some of your favorite players back then?
Oh, wow. I think John Havlicek is the first real pro player that I remember watching, a whole lot of. And then, not many people remember this guy, but we, in Defiance, you would get the Fort Wayne TV stations, so we got a lot of the Purdue games. And Rick Mount was just an absolutely tremendous shooter, and I fell in love with shooting, and I think a lot of that had to do with him. And then Pete Maravich came along, and his love affair with the game of basketball, it just came kind of contagious to us.
Oh yeah, I started with his parents, great people. His brothers, who were certainly good athletes. He has a sister that, they're all very supportive. You go to a Defiance game and there are a bunch of Lehmans around, and it's pretty cool.
Lehman family tournament in a driveway, who wins?
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because I like to tell the story. My dad was very, very creative, and I can remember, to help Mom out, we used to play horse games in the backyard for who did the dishes. And
well, I bet those were wars.
My older brother Jay and my dad and myself, and then eventually our younger brother Danny got involved with it. But I kid my older brother Jay. I said, I'm not the one with dishpan hands, so I won the horse games and he didn't. He had to go do the dishes.
You watch Rick Mount shoot.
That's right. That's exactly right.
So you're a 78 Defiance high grad, 1,000-point scorer. That's absolutely unbelievable. You finish high school, and then it's recruiting time. Now, was your porch or your house collapsing underneath recruiters? What was recruiting like back then compared to a little bit different now?
Yeah, totally different. And no, people weren't beating my door down. I had 4 or 5 offers.
Okay.
My older brother Jay was, as I said, a year ahead of me, and he had gotten a scholarship offer to Toledo and had a great freshman year. Yeah. So I was lucky that happened, and then some people I caught some people's eye. Miami University recruited me pretty hard, Ohio University, the University of Massachusetts, and I decided on Ohio University, and it's one of the top 5 decisions I've made in my life. It was a great decision for me personally. It was a great decision basketball-wise. We weren't tremendous, but the people that I met through the game of basketball, Athens, Ohio was a saving grace for me. It was a great place to go to college. It was a great place to live for a few years, and I had an absolute blast.
Right. So you're at Ohio University, and when you first get there, you guys are scuffling a little bit. But by the time you leave, you guys are up at second place, close to winning a MAC. People don't remember how tough the MAC was. Guys like Bobby Nichols at Toledo, really tough league. What was it like to see a turnaround, be part of something like that, where you left the program in a much better spot than when you began?
Well, it was really neat seeing Coach Nee come in to Ohio University and be demanding and expect things and make people go to class. And it really turned things around for us, changed everything for us, not only obviously in the classroom, but on the basketball floor. He did an absolutely tremendous job of recruiting. He got into New York City, got into Philadelphia, got some great players, John Devereaux, Vic Alexander, you know, and then I stayed on as a graduate assistant after my senior year. We started to make some progress. Stayed on as a graduate assistant in '83. We win the Mid-American Conference tournament, go into the NCAA tournament. Robert Tatum hits a shot at the buzzer to beat Illinois State, and then we play Kentucky in 2 days. So that was really cool to see that and the progression of how Coach Nee built the program with discipline and hard work and effort, and I learned an awful lot during that stretch, that 3-year period especially.
Did you always know you wanted to go into coaching or education, or was it that year as a grad assistant where you're like, you know, this is for me?
Well, you know, I knew I wanted to coach, and I wanted to coach because of Roger Renz, and then when I got to Ohio University and Danny Nee was there with Billy Hahn and Fran Fraschella and Joe Lombardi and some of those guys, you know, my itch for college was there as well, to coach in college, and I think I would have had some opportunities if I chose to do that.
Right.
But the high school game pulled me back in. I just wanted to be involved with high school kids. Probably didn't want to do the recruiting and things like that, and some of the things that I'd seen Billy and Franny and those guys do.
How was your family, your folks, how were they able to handle having you at Ohio, your brother at Toledo? What was that like for the family?
Well, great question, because it's a great story, and I like to tell it because it just kind of shows the type of parents that my mom and dad were. You know, there would be times where my brother Jay was playing at Toledo at the time, and they would play at Kent State in an afternoon game at 1 o'clock.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, and Toledo would play there. They'd travel to Kent State, watch the game, and as soon as the game was over, they'd get in their car and drive to Athens.
Putting the miles on the car.
And if we had a 7 o'clock game, and so many times they would see a day-night doubleheader, I guess you would call it.
Let's get into your coaching career a little bit. So you've played for some amazing coaches, and now it's time for you to start building your own program. What are some of the values that you took from those guys when you started in 1984 with Tenora? What are some things that you built your program on?
Well, I think, you know, one of the most basic things, but one that hits home with me that Roger Renz always hit us up with is you have to be a team. You know, you can't care who gets the credit. You've got to move the basketball. You've got to get touches. You've got to get the ball reversed, and not be afraid to pass the ball to the hot shooter or something to that effect. So that was one of the things. And then hard work. Coach Renz was super big on that, and I think especially at the high school level, hard work's one of the best things, because I think those players can take that to their later life. You know, I can count on, you know, maybe 2 hands, probably just one, the number of college players that I've coached, but I know there's hundreds of players who have gone on to be professionals, and hopefully hard work is one thing that our program was based on.
Sounds like you were more concerned with developing the person overall as opposed to just a basketball player. Is that true?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that came from Coach Renz a lot too, because he was big on that. And I can remember numerous times, you know, I was kind of talkative as a high school student and as a younger person, and you know, Coach Renz and my father always used to harp on that a lot. And you know, he said, Coach Renz used to say that's important, how you treat your teachers and how you behave in the classroom and things like that. That'll carry you a lot further than your three-point shot. And at that time, we didn't have a three-point shot, but your jump shot and that kind of thing.
We get ready for a big game or a team that likes to score a lot. Coach Lehman would always talk about handling their waves or handling their adversity that's going to come with playing this team, because that's going to happen. And it's about how you can bounce back from those things. And Coach Lehman would always relate that back to life, because things aren't always going to be smooth sailing. It's more how you respond to those types of things and keep persevering through it.
Some of your seasons that I feel like you're most proud of are the ones where you got everything out of them. Maybe it was a 500 record, but you didn't have undefeated talent. And you look back at it like, wow, that was an amazing job that we did just to get those 10 wins out of them. Did you have seasons like that there?
Absolutely. At Tenora, we had some young men who were hardworking, tough young men and continued to work extremely hard. With Jimmy Garris, John Brownlee, some of those guys, Mike Bainfeld, Brett Meyer, and some of those guys. They worked extremely hard, and I think we got the most out of their abilities and had good seasons.
So after Tenora, you decided to go to Rossford in '93. What precipitated the move?
Well, it was a situation where, it was time to move on from Tenora.
Okay.
And the Rossford job opened up. And, I had known growing up, especially when I was in junior high and early high school, Rossford had a great program.
Oh, yeah, great old gym.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And they came to Defiance and played. They were in the top 5 in the state, and luckily Defiance beat them at that time. But Rossford was a very well-respected program.
Right.
Joe Stallman had been the head coach there, and it's a basketball-crazy community.
Yes.
And I had known that. And when things needed to move on from Tenora, that job opened up, and I applied for it, and luckily got it. And great experience, great basketball players. I had 2 of the Gladio brothers. That was there, Joey Hollifield, who was a very successful player for Cardinal Stritch. I had his father, Joey Hollifield, who was a very, very good player. Stephen Verboski, Jeff Reif was a 6-foot center who was probably overachieved more than any player that I've ever coached for a 6-foot center. He was a great, great player. So we had some very good teams there for 4 years, and that was a fun place to coach. Great assistant.
So after 6 years, Bear Bryant always says, when Mama calls, you go home. And so after 6 years, Mama called, and you got to come back to Defiance, which just had to be one of those moments where you're looking up and saying yes, because you get to go and coach the same school where you played at, and then fill the shoes that Roger Renz, your mentor, was the head coach at. What was that like?
Well, it was a great chance for me. Barry Parsons called me. I was at Rossford at the time, still teaching, and I can remember the call in the springtime. And he said, "Hey, we got an opening for head coaching job, and just want to know if you're interested." And I said, "Absolutely, I'm interested."
Yeah.
And I've had the chance in the 80s and one time in the 90s to look into the Defiance job. Excuse me, but just didn't think I was ready for it. Didn't think I was ready to come back at that time, but in 2003 I was ready. I was ready to come back. My wife and I are both from the Defiance area, and our families were here, and it was time to come back. And I can't thank Barry Parsons enough for making that phone call and giving me the chance to come back to my alma mater, and worked out tremendously.
Huge butterflies, first game coaching the Bulldogs?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
A ton of family. My sister and her husband come to all the games. My aunts and uncles are in the stands. Brent at that time, our son, was coming up to start playing. He was still in junior high at that time. But yeah, absolutely butterflies. And that's one thing that I always had as a coach and as a player. I always had butterflies. People say, you're probably not nervous anymore. I got nervous before every game. That's just what I felt. You needed to be ready to play, or you needed to be ready to coach. Now, once the game started, they go away, but was always nervous before games.
I always kept a Buckeye in my pocket. I don't know why. I just always had to have it. Did you have any superstitions like that?
Well, I always gave a head nod to my wife.
Okay.
Just letting her know that I know she's there, and she's letting me know she is there, and she's sitting up there. but always did that. In a couple games I can remember, she got there late, and I kind of looked around for her and bugged my son about where his mom was and that kind of thing. But that's basically the only superstition that I had.
My one superstition I had too was having good players.
Yeah, there you go.
I always felt luckier when I had good players.
That's not a bad superstition at all. That makes for a lot easier.
It sure does. I'm always a smarter coach when I have good players.
The tradition here is very, very well known about what we do as a basketball program and what kind of standard Coach Lehman sets.
Well, the first thing that comes to mind when you play a Lehman coach team, I don't care if it was at Tenora, we didn't play him down at Rossford. No matter what, you better be ready to play because they're going to come at you and they're not going to lie down. So that's probably first and foremost. And he got that out of his players each and every night. And I'm going to guess that obviously was a carryover from practice.
A couple former players said that practice were so tough that sometimes the games were just a breeze. By design?
Yes, absolutely. And again, another philosophy of Roger Renz. He thought practices should be 3 times as hard as the game.
Right.
So now when you got in the game, and you were ready for those things. And I think I got better as a coach as the years went on, that I let the games, the players do their thing for the most part.
Let them play.
Yeah, absolutely.
You did your work at practice.
Absolutely.
Let the bird fly.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. And then in the games, you just kind of let them do their thing and not put too much pressure on them.
So people think sometimes when you just leave the school that your job is done as a head coach. I tried to always equate it that the moment you wake up, you're still the head basketball coach, head football coach, whatever. You go to the grocery store after practice, you're still the coach. You're never not the coach, correct?
Exactly. And you can probably ask my wife that better than anybody, but I used to keep a tablet by the bed because I'd wake up in the middle of the night and I'd write something down, or I'd write a drill down, or some tendency that a team had that just happened to click at that time. But your mind was always occupied. Right. And that's one thing that my wife and I talked about. It's tough always being on, and that's how basketball season, you're always on. And
it is.
And it was that time to say, hey, enough's enough, I guess.
Have you ever had this conversation where you guys are watching TV and she says, "Where you at?"
or she says, "I'm not going to talk to you anymore because you're not paying attention."
Right.
That's usually what I got, but no doubt about it. Because you're thinking about, how practice went. You're thinking about this. But again, one thing I thought I did much better, and once Bryn started playing, Leslie always asked me, she says, "Hey, please don't bring basketball home as much as possible," and I got better at that.
Okay.
I didn't take basketball home as much, but as you said, you still kind of in the back of your mind,
it's
you're
tough,
still thinking
isn't it?
about it. Yeah.
Now you talked about Leslie several times. How important has she been in your career? I read that you called her your best assistant.
Yeah.
You're probably a great sounding board. Just elaborate a little bit how important she's been.
Well, just the time that she sacrificed to have the kids when I was at practice or I was going earlier in my career. Now you don't do it as much because of the video exchanges and huddle and some of those kind of things. You don't travel as much scouting, but shoot, we'd go every Tuesday and scout. We'd go every Thursday and scout sometimes. And
big date night.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the sacrifices that she made and the things that she went through. She's a very proud person. She's a very strong person, and I couldn't have done it without her, that's for sure.
Oh, what a great team. They were just, there was a bunch of guys that played well together. You know what? They had a nice tournament. They had a hard, not an easy tournament run that they had to make. And then when they did earn the trip to Columbus, that was so awesome. People still harp on that dunk call that went against Cleveland Catholic, and I said it was the right call.
John Thompson at Georgetown said, "Winning a championship is undescribably delicious." And Phil Jackson said, "It's like a sad elation." How would you summarize that moment when you win a state title in that moment? What was the feeling for you?
Absolute joy.
Absolute
joy for everybody involved that had touched my life, that had touched all our players for all their hard work. The players from the past, I thought of everybody. I thought of my parents. It was just absolute joy because there's not another game. There's nothing to get prepared for. That's the end of so it was just absolute joy is the best I can do.
You know, the one thing about his teams that they were willing to change up, you know, particularly defense. You know, for years he was a man-to-man guy. And as time wore on, now he's got some big old guys with long arms, and gee, now you see a 1-3-1, you see a 2-3 zone, and you know, and he has stayed with that. You got to kind of bend with, you know, be flexible a little bit, and Lamo certainly was.
So you got to coach and coach with your son.
Yeah.
What's that like?
Yeah, it's great. It's great. I've had some great assistant coaches. You think back to one of the assistants that when I played here, Obi Mauser, he got to coach with me. Bob Fett and Tom Rex were tremendous coaches. Dave Maxey, Kane Wagner, and Jacob Moore, former players that got to coach with me here at Defiance. But there's nothing better than coaching your son, and there's nothing better than coaching with your son. He's been tremendous. He's a competitor. He's a hard worker. Just does a great job, and he's a heck of a lot smarter than his old man.
Must take after his mom.
That's exactly right.
All right, I'd like to touch on some of the players that you've had.
Oh, boy.
And if I know we're probably not going to be able to touch on all of them, but I'm going to throw some at you and just tell me what made them outstanding players.
Okay.
Jim Harris at Tenora.
Oh, wow. Yeah, Jimmy just loved the game of basketball. He loved playing. Versatile, played at both ends. Resilient, hard-working kid. Great talent. Could really jump. Really developed an outside shot as he got older. Just a very, very good player and a great, great player at Defiance College.
Awesome. Matt Gladio at Rossford. I saw him play when I was younger. He could shoot.
Yes, he could shoot. Matt Gladio was the ultimate offensive player. He was a great offensive rebounder, and I used to tease him a little bit about, he's so greedy, he goes after every rebound because he wants to score.
Right.
And greedy was the wrong word, but that's kind of how he played. He was so hungry to get points. He was a great, great offensive rebounder, but the biggest thing that I remember about Matt Gladio, and it's the first player that I ever coached that did this, we would go through a practice, and as many of our players would probably tell you, our practices are pretty intense and pretty hard. He'd go up into the stands, and he'd run for 15 minutes after that practice.
Really?
Yeah. In every preseason practice. And I'll never forget that, just watching him go up there and run after he'd just gone through a 2-hour practice.
Did you get tired watching him?
I wasn't going to join him. I know that much, Miles.
All right, Katwan Singleton here at Defiance.
Probably, and I hate to single one or two players out, but probably the best player I ever coached.
Really?
Yeah. Great leader, great offensive player, great defensive player. Averaged 15.6 points a game, I think, his senior year on only 9 shots, and could have averaged 30.
Wow.
But he knew, and there's a trophy out there in a trophy case that we'll look at, I think, that he helped bring here, and a lot of that had to do with his unselfishness, because he could have made it about him, and he could have worried about points and so forth. And Katwan Singleton was the ultimate winner. And that probably pushed him over the top as far as the best player that I've coached.
Raised the rest of his team?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Just made everybody else better.
And then Alex Knopsinger here at Defiance.
Probably one of the hardest working players I ever coached.
Okay.
I like to tell the story, Alex probably deserved to be WBL Player of the Year his senior year. In 2010, we won the league, and a lot of it had to do with his defense. Great point guard, handled the basketball really well, but absolutely tenacious at the defensive end. Could guard a guard, could guard a center. He guarded all the best players, and I don't think any of the best players in our league, and it was really good at that time, got double figures against him. And that's what made me feel he was the WBL Player of the Year. Now, unfortunately, not only did he not get that, he didn't even get first team, but I think that goes back to a lot of time those postseason awards
Right.
go to the players that score.
Right.
And Alex wasn't a huge scorer.
For
but
some reason, basketball is always driven on the stat sheet by
Yep.
points scored, and people will say, well, he only averaged 6 points a game. But boy, look how he changed the game.
Exactly, and
Right.
that's exactly why I'll argue to this day that in 2010 he should have been the WBL Player of the Year.
And a lot of people have asked me about Coach Lehman retiring, about what this means for the program and everything
Right.
like that. And I'm not too worried about this program. I know Coach Lehman put it in a good spot foundation-wise and everything
Absolutely.
like that. And I'm not too worried about the trajectory of this program. I think they're still going to be a great program, and just the standard's going to be set.
When you say Defiance High School, I think his name comes up real quick in a conversation. He'll be remembered as a guy that represented the school, the community school, with class. If you were to ask people in the area, coaches, basketball, whatever sport, a comment about Kirk Lehman, you won't hear anything bad.
Coach, young coaches going into the job, when I first got in, an old coach told me, he said, you're joining a noble profession, son. And I always remembered that. Advice you have for young guys coming in?
Well, I think the biggest thing is understand the work ethic that it's going to take.
Yeah.
Because to do the job right, I think you really have to work at it.
true.
Understand the communication part of it, which is probably something us old coaches aren't the best at. I think that's becoming more and more important. And I think two things that you got to get your teams to do, and that's play hard and play together.
Right.
You got to get them to believe that it doesn't matter who scores the points, and that was the great thing about Katwan Singleton.
Kirk, as intense as he was and as competitive as he was, and he carried it over, to his players. After the game, win, lose, or draw, hey, he's a good friend. I mean, I label him a good friend. We've many times had to try to solve the problems of the Indians and the Browns.
I know you like to collect baseball cards.
I do.
All right. Tell us a little bit what's next for you.
Well, I still love the game, and I'm going to miss the game, but it's time to do other things. It's time to go fishing. It's time to get that baseball card collection back out, and it's especially time to sacrifice some of my time for my wife, Leslie. That's number one on the list, that's for sure, and then spending time. What little time I've had to be a granddad, that's the best.
Yeah.
So there's another one coming, and then my daughter's getting married in October, so it's time to give back to those guys that sacrificed for me.
Well, I can tell you're excited about it. Your smile just lit up the room when you talked about the grandkids. Good for you. Baseball card collection, what's your best card that you love?
Probably a
pride
58
joy.
Mickey Mantle.
Oh, 58 Mantle.
Yeah, I'm going to
Wow.
go 58 Mickey Mantle. There's some Indian cards that I probably would go
Nobody
with.
wants those.
Unfortunately, you're right.
I had sent him a text and said, you're going to see how the other half lives on Friday night. And, I'm going to guess he'll continue to go to ball games for the Bulldog games. And if he wants to miss, he doesn't have to go.
Coach Lehman, you are Defiance basketball in my eyes. You poured everything you had into this program as a player and a coach, and man, I feel bad for the kids that don't get to play underneath you. I know that they're going to play through your standard of this program, but I just kind of feel for the kids that don't get to play for you, because you impacted me in such a big way.
Final thoughts, final message you'd like to share with the people in Defiance here?
Well, just that there's been so many great players and so many great assistant coaches that I've had, and the administration here at Defiance has been absolutely tremendous. And I think, maybe that's one thing I missed of giving advice to young coaches. Work for an administration that's supportive.
Right.
And boy, our administration has been, from Mike Struble, our superintendent, to Bob Morton, now our superintendent, was our principal, Jay Jerger. I've just been very, very blessed to work for great administration. And what else can you say about Jerry Beauty? He's the best AD around. And
Hey, Jerry always does a great job. We love coming
yeah.
here. He always makes it easy for us.
Absolutely, and he makes it easy for a coach. The state championship team and that weekend, I didn't have any worries about any paperwork and things like that. Jerry had it all taken care of. So if you can find an administration like I've been lucky enough to find a great administration in Defiance, that'll go a long way in your coaching career.
Well, Coach, congratulations on a great career, and we wish you nothing but success from here on out.
Thanks, Miles.